Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior corporate leader, a fellow YPR from China, Mr. Alvin Wang Graylin. Alvin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ash. I appreciate the invite and look forward to our chat.
Thank you. Alvin is the China president of HTC. He's the global VP of corporate development, HTC. He's also the president of the VRVCA. He's the vice chairman of IVRA. And as I mentioned, he's a fellow member of the YPO. Alvin has been recognized, felicitated, and awarded several times. So, Alvin, before we get into any further discussions, tell me about your own amazing journey to the top.
Well, first of all, I don't think I'm at the top. I think I'm still I'm on that journey. And I guess from the beginning, it's probably more interesting to start from where I was born and grew up. I was actually born during the Cultural Revolution in China, actually on a re-education farm. So both my parents were educators and artists. So my dad was a professor of art at the Guangzhou Academy of Fine Arts, and my mother was one of the founders of the Shanghai Ballet School and the Guangzou Ballet School, and she was also a dancer for the Beijing Ballet. But they I guess because of their kind of educational intellectual background during the Cultural Revolution, they were sent to be re-educated in the farms, and that's kind of where I started. And we were very fortunate that after the Cultural Revolution, because my mom is half Chinese, half American, we were able to get a sponsorship to immigrate from China to the U.S. and it kind of started my journey of having a more Western education and also broadening my sights. So in fact, I think that's when I landed in the U.S. I remember my dad sat me down, my brother and I I was 9 and he was 12, and he said, hey, we've given up everything that we have so that we move to a new country for you, to this land of opportunity. Make sure you make the most of it. And but we also don't have any money. So if you want to go to college, you have to get good grades and you have to get scholarships, and whatever you need, you have to buy yourself.
Amazing.
And so I think that talk kind of gave me the direction and purpose and drive of what drove me to do what I did, and pursuing excellence and pursuing independence. In fact, since pretty much about a month after I got there, my brother and I both started to work. So I, essentially from the age of 9, and I've been employed in some way. Everything I've had in my life, I actually bought through my own work. So my first TV, my first bike, my first computer, my first car, everything was something that I valued because I felt like I actually worked for it. And I equated everything to how many hours of labor I had for it. So you have a appreciation for the things that you have. And so both my brother and I actually were very fortunate. We both went to the University of Washington for undergrad and double E, and then we both went to MIT for grad school, and both of us got full ride scholarships. So we at least satisfy what my dad asked for, and in fact both of us became entrepreneurs. In fact, later on he sat us down and said, you guys are here. You guys have to fulfill your purpose for life, and every human has to have something that they contribute to the world. And for your mother and I, we're artists, so all we can do is to bring beauty to the world. But you guys don't really have artistic talent, so go find something else you can do.
Okay.
So we both ended up being engineers and then being entrepreneurs, and I think both of us have had founded 4 different venture-backed startups. Have had exits. Both have worked for large corporations. And the last 7 years I've been with HTC,
Mm.
and essentially helping drive the whole XR and VR metaverse um, direction and industry for China. So it's been a fun ride.
Fascinating. And we will talk about the metaverse. But my next question is, Alvin, HTC is such a powerful and large organization. I wanted to ask you what goes into building a global company out of China?
I mean, HTC was already, pretty successful and large
Yeah.
company before I got there. And Cher Wang is the founder, and it's when I joined, it was, I think, about 18 years. It's now about 25-year-old company. But I think that the key success factor for HTC has really been about innovation and about doing things that other people haven't done. From being essentially the first source company to actually make a smartphone, to make a touchscreen phone, to make a 3G phone, 4G phone, 5G phone, dual camera phone, and then the first company to create full spatial VR devices that allows you to walk around the entire room. The first company to create standalone VR devices so that you're not linked to a computer without any wires. And the first company to create thin and light VR devices. So at every stage, whether through the telecom industry or through the VR XR space, we've always been a company that has created the first to market. But I think it's also had its ups and downs. At one point it was the largest phone company in the world. It's actually bigger in volume of shipments than Intel, than Apple and Samsung.
Yep.
But a few years, I think about after 2012 or 13, it started to drop in terms of volume. But in terms of the China business, when I got here, actually it was a fairly new business for us, and my team was 5 people, and I went from that to essentially becoming the number 1 player in the market for the VR space.
Wow.
So it's been a good ride, and I think the key is having really good people that share your vision, and being an evangelist in whatever you believe in and
Correct.
everything you do.
Correct.
So,
well said. So let's talk a little bit about the metaverse. The whole world is now becoming excited about it, but not too many people know very much about the metaverse, except that it is something which a lot of tech leaders seem to know and seem to be putting serious money in.
yes.
My first question to you, Alvin, is with the coming of the metaverse, how will the digital challenges be handled by companies in the virtual world?
I mean, first of all, I think we should probably define it so that we actually understand what we think it is.
Yeah.
Because I think there's too many people who have associated the term with a lot of different things. The easiest way for me to explain it is that it is the internet that we've been using for the last 30 years or building globally. But instead of a video and text-based internet, we're moving to a 3D-based internet.
Yeah.
So the content should be based on 3D, and it'll be powered by AI, so that every factor in terms of how you use it, how the content's created, how it's regulated, how the worlds interact with you, will all be powered by AI. And then the interface will likely be a VR XR device. Now, for the next 4 or 5 years or 5, 6 years, likely most of people still will be using computers and laptops and phones to use it. So they'll still be using a 2D screen, but over the 5 to 10 year period, people will probably all transition to a XR device, because that's the most natural way to consume this 3D content. So I know some people will associate it with crypto and blockchain and all that. I think crypto and blockchain is actually a parallel track, and a lot of people call it Web3. But I think Web3 and the metaverse are actually not the same thing, so we don't want to conflate those. But there will be occasions where blockchain technology will be applied to this 3D internet. But it is definitely not a requirement. Right? And in terms of the how it will, I guess, how people will interact and use it, over probably in the next 5-10 years, what will happen is that most of our interactions, our daily lives, will actually move on to this 3D world where it will be where we go to work, where we go to school, where we interact with our friends, and it hopefully will create a borderless global society that allows anyone from anywhere to interact with anybody else and feel like they're together, and create hopefully reduce a lot of the conflict that we have in the world today. So I think a lot of the conflict that exists today is because of lack of understanding.
Correct.
And a lot of misunderstanding. And if we can sit down with people around the world and feel like they're next to us, and maybe even have the AI do real-time translations if we don't have the same language, we will be able to understand each other much more, and we will trust each other more. And I think that the world will be a better place. And actually, for a lot of the world, it will create a more egalitarian society, because the reason that my parents brought me to America was they felt like that's the land of opportunity. And if you were born here, you're even luckier because you already had that original opportunity. But there's a lot of people in the rest of the world who don't have the ability to go to the right school, or who don't have the ability to work for the right company, and so forth. But having a borderless global world where you can go in and be represented and as an avatar form, no matter what your age is, what your race is, what your gender is, and whether you're tall or short or whatever, it doesn't matter, because you will be judged by your intellect. You're going to be judged by your creativity and your imagination, and your ability to solve problems, and not by what clothes you're wearing, or who your parents were. So I feel like the world will be a better place once this technology becomes widespread.
I agree with you. But yet, Alvin, and I'm not an expert in this, nor do I have as much knowledge as you do. But from whatever I read, there seem to be multiple metaverses. How will this work? I mean, there's only one internet, but why multiple metaverses?
I think there's kind of a confusion in terms of what people call metaverses. Most of what people are calling metaverses are essentially virtual worlds or virtual games. And just like in the beginning of the internet, we had Prodigy and CompuServe and American Online. They were all kind of walled gardens of what people would call internet at the time. But over time, they essentially went away, and they were replaced by an open, interoperable internet. I think that's the direction that we're going now. So we have the Roblox, or the Decentraland, or whatever. A lot of these places are just virtual worlds. They're not metaverses. They should not be called metaverses. No company should own a metaverse, just like no company owns the internet. So I think that confusion is really more of a temporary confusion. Longer term, we should have a single global 3D internet that we would call the metaverse.
Fascinating. And how do you see the common human being? My father was a retired brigadier general, and I remember he had just about started, in his late 70s, started to use the World Wide Web. Now, I'm talking of people like him, not the very, very young people who take to technology so easily. How will the common person take advantage of the metaverse?
Well, so I think this is actually where the magic happens, because proper XR technology leverages all of your senses, and it uses all the natural ways that you interact in the real world, because we live in a 3D world. So we're designed as an animal that thrives in that type of space. We walk around, we look around, we use our hands, and in the metaverse, you put on these glasses, and you will be able to use your voice, use your hands, use your body, versus trying to type. A lot of people don't know how to type, and so they can't interact. Or if you're trying to use a touchscreen, it's very you're hunting and pecking. It's very hard to communicate, and a lot of menus you don't know how to use it. I have to. My mom calls me every day in terms of, oh, my iPad is broken. What do I need to do? And so. But if you have a properly functioning, I guess, mature metaverse environment, it should feel as natural as you would in the real world. And if you want to do something, you just pick up that thing and you would push the button, or you would lift it and talk to it. And And there should be an AI agent that is your long-term assistant that understands you, that continues to help you, and it brings you the information you need. So that it's like having a personal assistant with you everywhere. So whether you're elderly or whether you're your child, if you have a helper that can guide you through whatever task you need, life becomes a lot easier.
Correct. Well said. Well said. My next question to you is that, and this is a little bit of a hypothetical question for you, that in a world which has got so many differences, so many economic differences in countries, will technologies like the metaverse not expand the divide between the haves and the have-nots?
So I think this technology will allow certain markets that have more money to get access to it first. But then it will also allow the poorer markets to have that global marketplace that they never had access to, right? So I'll give you an example. When I was in undergrad, my thesis study was about how to use VR to enable better education. And we were looking at how can you use full body, full brain exercises in terms of enabling learning. And if we can use your full senses, kids can learn a lot faster, a lot earlier. And in fact, we did some studies in China on this with multiple universities, and it consistently comes across that kids who are using VR to supplement their education will learn complex subjects faster, they will remember it longer, and they test better, right? And they're more willing to use whatever they learned. So for I'm sure you know that the number one factor that affects your long-term success is the amount of education you have.
Correct.
Kind of no matter where you're born, if you have more education, your average income is going to be essentially directly proportional to your education. Now, if we can allow somebody who just has a $200, $300 device to be able to get the same education as a person who spent $1 million to go to Harvard. It actually equalizes the world, right? And what it also does is that, right now, each of these schools can only have a few thousand kids a year. Correct. So it becomes a very exclusive thing. But if we can say, hey, I want to make all of these the best professors in the world. When I went to MIT, there was 50 Nobel Prize winning laureates that were professors there. Why can't we make them accessible to a classroom of 1 million kids? Correct. Or why can't we record them in a 3D space and then have them AI personalize their lectures to the individuals that are each calling in and then feeling like they're having a one-to-one lesson with the Nobel laureate. That's going to help raise the level of education across the world. And the more educated you are, the more you have an ability to participate in the global economy. So there may be many billionaires out there, but you don't have to be a billionaire to be happy. Right. So if we can raise the overall quality of education, the overall quality of life, and the overall quality of communication, and in fact, by having a metaverse available, accessible to everybody, we provide experiences that once was only available to the billionaires and the millionaires. That anybody with a couple $100 device can travel to wherever to go. You can go to Mars, you can go to the moon, you can go underwater, right? You can go back in history. Things that even billionaires can't do today, we can allow them to have access to. And I think that's actually even more valuable than just giving people, just increasing wealth for people, is giving them the ability to experience things that very few people in the past was able to experience.
Oh, fascinating. Amazing. My next question to you is that as someone who has seen technology over the last few decades, someone who understands this whole technology, if you were to look into your crystal ball and look ahead, what are some of the future technology disruptions you see in the short term and long term?
In terms of how the metaverse
and XR and all the other things that you're looking at?
Well, I think we're at a real inflection point in society overall, and it's not just a single technology. It's really the convergence of multiple exponential technology that are all arriving at the same time. And everything from AI to XR to genetic, anti-aging technology. We're going to be able to live a lot longer.
Yes.
We're going to be able to have essentially infinite information access and infinite information processing, right? And we're probably, maybe even in our lifetime, able to get infinite energy access. So essentially anything that I feel like we're going to be we have a possibility to really get to a fairly utopian world once we have that, because then it really is meaningless to have wealth. Because if you can know everything, you can go anywhere, you can do anything, then does it matter if you have money or don't have money? In fact, I think at that point, we're going to have robots do most of the manual labor and AI to do most of the thinking. So we essentially will become a global society of people of leisure.
Absolutely.
I think that's kind of where things are going. And it's going to be an amazing place, but I think it also is a ethical challenge for us, because once we can have everything, then what do we live for?
Correct.
Why do we live? And what pushes us? What drives us? I think that's the part that we need to start thinking about, versus technology. Because I feel like I'm not really worried about technology advancement, because I've seen it for the last 4 or 5 decades, and every year it gets better, cheaper, faster.
Correct.
And there's no reason why it should slow down right now. The only things that could probably slow it down is we do it to ourselves, right? If we start having pushing the wrong buttons and sending missiles everywhere, I think that and maybe the climate issues. So if we utilize these technologies in a way where we can start to burn cleaner energy, and we can be more mindful in terms of how much materials we use, be having a more holistic relationship with the earth that we live on, I think this world is going to be a very good place, and we can live here for a very long time without concerns.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. And my last question to you, Alvin, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your amazing and incredible journey, from the time you were 9, you've been doing some kind of work to now running not just a big technology outfit, but a very futuristic technology outfit. What would you say are 3 lessons you would want our viewers and listeners to take away?
Okay. I think for me, the key is you have to find your purpose. You have to find something that drives you.
Yeah.
You have to maintain a curious mind. So you're always learning, always reading. We talked about this earlier before the session. Really filling your brain with the information that's out there, because there's just so much information, and it's such a waste if we don't take advantage of it. And then I think lastly is really surround yourself with people you respect, and people that care about you, because at the end of the day, we're a social animal.
Yeah.
And no matter how much money you have or how much success you have, if you don't have people around you that you care for and care about you, then there's very little meaning to any of it.
Well said. And on that note, Alvin, and your 3 amazing lessons: find your purpose, have a curious mind, and surround yourself with people you respect and those who care for you. Thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you for talking to me about your own amazing journey. I mean, as you were talking, I was actually making notes because of something new that I was learning, everything that you were saying. Thank you for talking to me and to all our audience about the metaverse, and how I learned something new, that the Web 3.0 is not necessarily the metaverse. It's metaverse is the Web 3.0 in 3D, maybe. Thank you also for giving me your incredible thoughts on how the metaverse is going to actually impact people, about the children, and how education plays a big role. And you and I both come from societies which have had a lot of focus on education, both China and India. And I think that really says everything all about how these two communities seem to be using education, powering themselves. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
No, thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure. So, and hopefully this has been useful to your audience.
I'm sure it has. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.